Welcome to Rich Conversations. Today we'll chat with Paul LeCrone. Over the month of July, we read the book Pale Blue Dot by Carl Sagan. This episode is about to take you to outer space. You can follow Paul at A Penguin Latte. Let's begin. All right. So I'm here with Paul LeCrone. And so the last 2 months, we've each read the same book. And we started with Brave New World. And then last month was Walden. And this month we did Pale Blue Dot by Carl Sagan, a space guy. Why don't you give a summary? You're good at summaries. Why don't you summarize the book?
Oh, thank you. I would say, well, it's a book that I would have read when I was 13, when I was 12, when I was really big into astronomy, actually. I remember my stepdad and I used to take out this telescope and just look at the stars. And actually, my uncle is pretty big into astronomy too. He actually lives in Germany. And so whenever he would visit me, whenever he would come back to the States, he's lived in Germany for like his whole life teaching English over there. And I would take out the telescope with him and we would just look at the moon and the stars. And I had this astronomy magazine and I was so convinced that I would become an astronaut. Like every 13-year-old kid, like just wants to be an astronaut, right? That was me. That was definitely me. So if I had read this book earlier on in my life, it probably would have had a much, much bigger impact on me. I mean, not that I didn't like the book. I enjoyed a lot of it, but looking back on how interested I was in astronomy, it definitely would have been the book for me to read as a kid, for sure. And I really like the beginning of it too. I mean, that's the famous part, right? Like the here we are, here's us parts as well.
Yeah.
I really like space physics mysteries, but this is where my lingo fails me, because I like stuff related to like dark matter and things we don't know yet about the structure of the universe and weird phenomena. I was hoping that this book would be like that, but it wasn't. And okay, that just wasn't that kind of book. Like whatever.
Right.
So that's the kind of stuff about space that I'm really interested in. Like I can get into those kinds of Wikipedia rabbit holes where you click dark matter and then you click something else related to dark matter. Then it's like this weird phenomena that scientists haven't figured out, and then here's another weird phenomena, and I could just do that for hours.
See, I read it as like, because it came out in 1994 or 97, around there. Yeah. And so there's so much more that we've done in space. I don't know in particular, but this, I read it as more like a summary of space exploration, I feel like, and where it could potentially go as humans.
Yeah.
Going to other planets. And then as I'm reading it too, I can't help but think about, like SpaceX and NASA and Elon Musk.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting to read it. And this was, 25 years ago or so. And things are happening now that I'm like, I haven't been someone who's been really interested in space, but I appreciate it. And a lot of my learning recently has kind of taken me into this like futuristic direction. So I was like, I gotta start catching up on space. What's happened in space?
Yeah, what people were thinking about space back in the 90s. I wonder what Carl Sagan would have said about the whole era of Elon Musk and SpaceX too. Because that's what I was thinking about while I was reading this, where we are right now with space exploration. I really liked opening up the chapter 1 and seeing a Marcus Aurelius quote too. I wasn't expecting that. So that really made me smile. It says, "The entire earth is but a point and the place of our own habitation, but a minute corner of it." Very much Marcus Aurelius. And yeah, it kind of piggybacks off of what we were talking about earlier in the last episode about this is the only planet we have. We got to take good care of it, take good care of each other, because that's really all that matters. Just holding ourselves up to that standard.
Yeah. I thought you'd appreciate that. There's like, you mentioned philosophers in there.
Yeah.
Not always the greatest of light, but
right.
It's definitely a more hard science angle.
Definitely, it is much more of a hard science angle for sure. Yeah, I'm not that used to reading books by people who work with, let's say, deductive reasoning, very logical people. I
Okay.
actually started reading Black Swan too, and I had to reread sentences from that book more times than I thought, just because I'm just not used to that
Yeah.
kind of thinking, that just very rational kind of writing as well. And I know you've
Yeah.
read some Nicholas Taleb as well.
Yeah. Anti-Fragile. That's another good one.
Hmm.
One question I had for you. When was the last time that you gazed at the stars?
It's a great question. I love that question too. Last night.
Last night. So you can
Last night.
see it. You're in
I do
San
it a lot.
Diego.
Yeah. Oh, you mean really stargazing without
Yeah,
any
like
lights? Oh,
real,
okay.
real.
Okay. I'm just talking about just looking up at the stars.
Like, have you had moments where you're like blown away?
Not without any light pollution, and probably not in the way that you're imagining. It's tough to go out and find it's also tough to just get yourself to go and create that time to go and do that, because it doesn't seem like the most productive use of one's time, but it is very strange to do it, to just have no light around you and to just look up at the sky. It's pitch black. And the thing that always blows my mind is that those stars aren't there anymore.
Yeah.
Thinking about that leads just to some just crazy mental places. Like, uh, oh, and what I really like too, that Carl Sagan said, was that the reason why stars, if I have this correctly, that stars like shine and glare is because of turbulence in the air, making the light look like it's bouncing off walls, but it's really not twinkling. It's just the turbulence in the air. I hope I have that right. I don't want like scientists to say
Yeah, I don't,
that like I'm
I,
wrong
I
or
don't know. I don't
not an
know.
expert, but I thought that was really cool too. But yeah, not very recently. I haven't looked up at the stars in that way in a long time, probably since I was much younger. I've looked up at the stars in my neighborhood, but not without any light around me. And I want to do that again. See, I want to take this hiking trip where I just go and do that. That's all.
Yeah. I so recently, a few friends came up to Wisconsin with me on the farm. And so two of the guys are from New York and the other guy's from Mexico
Mhm.
City. And we all live in Chicago together and we live there. And when I approached them, hey, you guys want to come up to Wisconsin on the farm and just hang out, have a campfire and stuff? And they're like, yeah, can we see the stars? Can you see the stars there?
Yeah.
And that was like a really big thing to them. And I was like, yeah, you can see it. And they're like, oh, wow, awesome. So they're really excited. And I'm only like, give or take, like 25 miles southwest of Milwaukee. So while we're in the middle of nowhere in rural Wisconsin, you can see to the northeast the light from Milwaukee. And
Mm.
it really astounded them that, wow, that's what light pollution looks like. And then you look west and it's dark. It's
Mm.
really dark. And then we saw the stars and the Big Dipper, and it
Yeah.
was just so cool.
It's hard to get into complete darkness because you don't know that you're in it. You don't know
Hmm.
that you are in all of this light pollution. And then you kind of go out of bounds out of the city and you're still sort of in it because that's just how far it reaches too. You really got to go out of your way to just be surrounded by absolute darkness just to see all of what's above you too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's wild how.
The, the only
Yeah.
other time I did this road trip by myself going out west. And at one point I visited Dinosaur National Monument on the border of Colorado and Utah. And that night I drove up to Grand Teton in Yellowstone. So it's like midnight. I'm just on this highway and I have to stop because moose are crossing the road. And it's so dark that I'm driving up because it's at night that the stars, like I see all the stars from my car. And at one point, I just pulled over, got outside of my car, and just looked up. And I was like, wow, I've never seen anything like this before. Because
Ah,
that's like true darkness in the middle of it's like a rural road going through like
yeah.
Utah and Wyoming. And then when I was at Yellowstone, I was sleeping in my car, and then I just got out and just looked up, and I was like, oh wow, it's like in your face. Like the
It
stars are
is.
so bright, they're in your face, and you
Yeah.
kind of have to like tilt your head back, like wow.
Why do you think we are so fascinated at just looking up at what's technically nothing? Because the stars aren't there,
Yeah.
but yet we're just so amazed by that.
Is it the wonder of what is out there,
Just the whole beyondness of it
or
all.
the
Yeah,
the
just
insignificance of ourselves?
it's very, I mean, it's the most humbling thing you could do, right?
Yeah.
I
I mean, the
can't think
whole
of
book
anything
is
more
about
humbling.
humility in a way.
Yeah, you could say that for sure. There's all of this stuff going on out there in the galaxies, in the universe right now that you can't and don't know about. And we think that the hustle and bustle of our day-to-day lives is the most important thing going on in the
Yeah.
universe. Maybe
Yeah.
in our universe, yeah, but that's not the universe, too. And so I've never thought that it's like depressingly existential to contemplate the vastness of existence. But some people seem to get kind of down about that. A friend of mine doesn't really like that topic because it just gets too dark and existential for him. To me, it's never been that way. To me, it's just been very invigorating and very humbling, and it reminds me of my own
Yeah.
BS that I can get caught up in, and just to take a step back as well. Because, yeah, everything that's going on in your universe is not everything that's going on in the grand vastness of existence. And
Yeah.
to talk about those big things has just never really discouraged me in that way, which I think might be a reason why maybe people don't take as much time as they could to contemplate just how small we are. And it's kind of a cool thing to know that we're just not at the center of the universe, and if we were, that'd be a lot of pressure. So thank God. I don't
Well,
know.
it's interesting too, like how he would say that the like entertainment back in the day,
Mm.
without all the lights and stuff, was you'd go outside and you'd watch the stars and you'd watch the
Yeah, well, that just reminded me of that scene from Brave New World where they were up in the sky without any stimulus around, and I always forget her name. The female character was getting all apprehensive because there wasn't any TV or entertainment around, and the Savage,
distractions. Yeah.
yeah, distractions, and the Savage just said like that's what it's supposed to be like. Just look up at the stars. That's it. Yeah, it's like the first form of entertainment that I guess humans ever had. Just look up. You can't replace that.
Do you have any friends that are like the outdoorsy type
I
that will
do.
go camping all the time?
Yeah,
Like
I
I
would
imagine I
consider.
know people that move out to Colorado because they're so drawn in by
Hmm.
the natural beauty and wonder of
I
the
want to go to
Rocky
Colorado.
Mountains.
Yeah, I really want to go to Colorado. Yeah, I consider myself more of an outdoors person too. Like I don't hike or fish. I mean, no, 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 that's wrong. I hike. I love hiking. I don't fish and I don't go camping as much as I want to. I actually used to hate doing all that stuff when I was a kid. Now I really want to. There's so many
Yeah.
great spots to go hiking at here in California, and probably a lot of great spots to just stargaze for hours for sure. I just haven't done it yet, but I really want to. Colorado also looks spectacular from what I've seen.
Yeah. It's
So beautiful. There's tons of spots here in America that would just make that so awesome too. I want to go to Reykjavik, Iceland as well. I heard Iceland is amazing too. You know, Aurora Borealis, and it doesn't get daytime. It doesn't get light outside until 9 in the morning, which is crazy.
really.
Yeah, I had a friend of mine who took a little vacation to Iceland too, and he said he travels a lot. And he said like, if you're gonna take a vacation, go to Iceland. It's awesome.
I feel like Iceland recently has climbed up on the tourist rankings.
Better go
Like
soon before
a
it
lot
starts
more
getting.
people are traveling there.
Yeah, it seems underrated.
Did you notice reading the book how many Moby Dick quotes he had?
No, I didn't. Were there a
He probably had
lot?
like 3 or 4 quotes from Herman Melville and Moby Dick.
Ah, no.
Carl Sagan must have been like a huge, huge Moby Dick fan.
Hmm. See, that's funny. What also kind of caught me off guard was he had these religious quotes too scattered throughout the book, but then he expressed his disdain towards, well, his thoughts on the religion versus science
Uh-huh.
debate as well. And then he'll include quotes from Psalms and actually bits from Moby Dick, which you could say is sort of like a religious story, like a redemption
Yeah.
story. I've actually never read Moby Dick, so I should stop talking about that because I haven't read it. But yeah, I was just caught off guard by that. I thought this guy would just absolutely not want to include anything from the Bible as a quote in his books, but then again, he did. So, I mean, I don't know much about Carl Sagan besides reading this book and the YouTube snippets of him. So,
Okay.
and I know a lot of people
Yeah, I'm in the
really
same
look
boat.
up to him.
I don't know too much about him. My friend really raves about this book, so it's been on my reading list for quite a long time.
Hmm.
And he was like, you know what, I gotta read this book.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I read another like space book by Chris Hattenfield.
Yeah.
He was astronaut.
Was
So
he the one who was in the space the spacecraft for like a year, and he was tweeting about it and sending Instagram updates about being up
I
in
don't, I
space?
don't
Was
know.
that the
Maybe
same
he
guy?
seems like a more like pop culture type
Oh,
of
okay.
astronaut.
I must be
Um,
thinking of somebody else.
I don't know. It could be that person.
Uh-huh.
What I thought was most fascinating about the book, and this is the reason why I think space is so important and exploring these ideas and these places of our imagination, is the need to work collaboratively with others and to communicate with others. Like we were just saying before, reflecting on our own insignificance, we realize the matters here that on Earth are so trivial. And it's like, why can't we get past these? Let's get past these so we can do some awesome stuff.
I think it's
Let's do
politics,
it.
if you ask me. I mean, I'm not completely against politics and government, but I think we just tie way too much. Like, we just hold ourselves back by wanting to just point and scream and shout at
Yeah.
anybody who has an opposing view. And I
But
don't
do
know
you
who's right and who's wrong, but the fact that we're just
Yeah.
like endlessly, we can't come up with a nice solution that everybody agrees with. And it's really hard to get solutions that everybody agrees with. But on matters of how to keep us all alive for the next 60, 80, 200 years, we got to come up with something. I mean, I know there's a lot of really good things going on in the world as well. I'm not totally a pessimist about the progress of humanity. I really do think that we're going in a pretty good direction, but we got a lot of work to do. I don't have any answers, but
do you
that's just
think
the way I see it.
do you think a lot of that comes down to ego though? Attaching personal worth,
Hmm.
self-worth to external things, labels, politics, groups, identities, and this kind of lack of perspective of how vast the universe is, that these politics and groups, it's not as
Yeah,
important as maybe individuals make them out to be.
it's it's tough. It's a huge problem. As I watch myself learning more and reading more books and diving into work by Carl Jung and the psychoanalysts who I love studying their work and their ideas, I see myself becoming more attached to the idea that introspection and understanding yourself and what's pulling your strings and all of the labels you've given yourself over the years, in unraveling those labels and those attachments to like big ego desires too. I am starting to become under the impression that understanding yourself as an individual is key to helping the world on a grand scale in a positive way too. So it's hard to say as I'm learning all of this stuff right now. Who knows what I'll say 30 years from now, but that's what I'm getting at too. Whenever I think of that, I don't know if that helped answer the question, because yeah, what I'm getting at is that I think it's just so important to understand yourself. Like, if you want to change the world, and this is nothing new, I'm not the first person to say this. Gosh, people have been saying this for 100 years, but you got to focus on yourself. And it seems selfish too, like, oh, you're just so focused on you, you don't care about the world. Yeah, you care about the world because you want to understand yourself on a deeper level. You want to know what you're about and what's pulling you. You want to know if there's any pathological belief systems underneath the way you think, and you want to unravel those. And that's tough to discover too. It's tough to come to like this conclusion that you're not as enlightened, enlightened, I suppose, as you might think. And introspection is difficult as hell, but it's worth it. It's worth it. That's why I think meditation is so powerful, especially in the age of constant information and news, and when news itself has been transformed into, as far as I can tell, just drama. Like, it doesn't matter whether you're left or
Yeah.
right. Each side is just blatantly making fun of the other one. Nobody's actually
Yeah.
coming to any conclusion. It's just drama. It's
Well, do you
literally just
think?
reality television.
Yes, that's a good way to put it. Do you find the more that you reflect and you go on these introspective paths, learning about yourself and who you are, that you realize you don't know much? And
Yes.
it's like
Yeah.
so humbling.
Yes.
And it's
Yes, I
this
completely
constant
agree.
journey and working towards just becoming a better person. And the more you think about yourself and who you are and how you're kind of wired, you understand what your strengths are and what you're not as good at. So
Mm.
then you focus on what you're better at so you can more likely contribute to the world in a positive direction. And with that humility, you reach this understanding that other people know a lot of other stuff that I don't. So it's not about me and
Mm.
like being right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is where a lot of friction comes to play in the world is everybody wants to be right and no one's
Yes.
willing to
Yeah.
accept or admit like, hey, I don't know, but what do you think? What's your perspective?
Yeah. So what
Where
you're
are you
talking
coming from?
exactly. And what you're talking about right now is reminding me of what I've been learning about from the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu. I don't know if you've ever read it, but there's a part in the Tao Te Ching where Lao Tzu is writing about what he called dullness. It's better for the Taoist to be dull, and when the leader is dull, the folk are happy. And then you think, well, dull, that just, you mean stupid? Well, no, dull means willfully ignorant and humbled in the face of what you don't know. It doesn't mean an attachment to intelligence or an attachment to wisdom, and to an attachment to wanting to be right all the time.
Yeah.
And part of this learning process for me with diving into introspection and books like the Tao Te Ching and psychoanalytic thought is being comfortable with surrounding yourself with like intellectual darkness. You don't know as much as you think you know. And that should be
Yeah.
invigorating. That's what pushes you forward. That's what keeps you moving. So in the Tao Te Ching, it talks about how the light of the Taoist isn't bright. It's humbled, and you move through the darkness of your ignorance. And I think it also depends on the translation you get to. If you want a really good translation of the Tao Te Ching, I highly recommend the John Minford translation. It's much more poetic and visual, and it helps you, if you're a more visual thinker, to think through and to imagine the ethics and the lessons that are being expressed through the book. It's much different than Meditations, which is very clear. This one's much more symbolic too, but the symbolic
Okay.
representations of exactly what you're talking about, it reminds me of it precisely. It's that, just being okay with not being right all the time. And who wants to be right all the time? Like, omnipotence is a
It's
really boring
exhausting. You know how
place. Yeah,
exhausting it
you got
is
to
to
hold that
always
up.
try
Yeah,
to be
it
right?
is exhausting. It is. And then you just like collapse at the end of the day, and you're like, oh my god, got through that day. Nobody figured out that I was wrong about something. Whew.
Oh man.
That's
Jeez.
tough. It is exhausting, and you become like psychologically lighter once you've dropped all that
Oh
pretense and that
yeah.
agenda. You can go through the world as if you're floating on air, and you can work on projects, and you can write things, and you can. And it's hard as hell because it's not like you can just shut off your ego on command. God, I wish I could do that. But meditation and introspection and just adopting that openness towards the world is just hard as hell, but so important.
Yeah. Well, to tie it back to Pale Blue Dot, while I'm reading this, this is a very intelligent person,
Mm-hmm.
space scientists, engineers, yet they don't know everything.
Yeah.
And as a human species, we don't know what we don't know. But that's why we constantly work to find that and to explore that and go on adventures so that we can constantly get better collectively, right?
We don't know what we don't know. That's the thing to know, right? When we talk about these no, you know, those conversations, those bar philosophy conversations where you talk about like what's the meaning of knowing and how do you know what you don't know and who
Yeah.
knows what and whose line is it or whatever. It's like it really is like that though, but knowing what you don't know. You
Yeah.
don't know what you don't know.
Exactly. Do you have
So
any final thoughts?
yeah, that's a great final thought. You don't know what you don't know. And more power to you. More power to you if you can admit that you don't know what you don't know. Because then that makes reading less boring. It makes intellectual pursuits less boring. You're more open. You're less defensive. You don't want to defend things that you attach, which is, I've got these lessons from the Tao Te Ching on my mind. That's why I keep referring back to it. Yeah, you got to be less defensive of what you hold dear to yourself, especially intellect and knowledge too. With
Yeah.
people who like to read and to collect information, they kind of it's easy to build up an ego around that. I've read all these books and
Yeah.
I know
Yeah.
everything because I've read so many more books than you. You read books because you don't really know a whole lot about the world, and you could read 200 books and still not know very much. And
There's so many.
yeah,
There's infinitely more books than the 200 books you've
and
read, or what, you know.
you'll never
You'll
read them
never
all ever,
know. Dude,
which
I have a
is
pile of library books that
uh,
I now have to. I'm gonna return to the library because I'm moving to a new
uh,
apartment, and I don't want to haul all those library books. That's the hardest thing to move is all these darn books. They're so heavy.
yeah. I have so many books now. It's ridiculous. I own more books than I have articles of clothing. Yeah, my room's pretty empty. I've been keeping a pretty minimalist approach to the things that I own, and I own more books than anything else. That's going to be a pain in the ass if I ever move somewhere too. That's why Kindles seem to be the way to go,
Yeah.
too, for sure, for sure.
Well, Paul, thanks for stopping by. Thanks for chatting
That
about
was fun.
space.
Yeah, good. Yeah, hopefully that'll be insightful for people who listen to my ramblings on about the universe with you as well. Always a pleasure, dude. Always a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to Rich Conversations. Again, you can follow Paul at a penguin latte. Make today a day that is out of this world.